Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the JTX Podcast. I have a very special guest this week in the form of Ali. Ali, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm very, very well, thank you. Now, Ali's done something very interesting over the past year, and that is that she's streamed every single day for over a year now on Twitch. But before we get into that, Ali, what was the first video game that you ever remember playing?
I always tell people Ocarina of Time, but I really think it was Link's Awakening. Uh, but I've played Ocarina of Time so many times. I played it on every console multiple times.
So you played the remake like on the 3DS and everything like that as well.
Yeah, but I never turned on the 3D. Like, did anybody ever turn on the 3D?
I didn't turn on the 3D. I would have. I feel like I'd have genuine questions of people who turn the 3D on.
Seriously.
Because I tried it. I was like, oh, hey, yeah, 3D, let's try it. And then,
yeah,
not so good.
No.
No, not so good. No. So how did you come about playing games in the first place? How did you?
In general?
Was it your parents bought you a console, or was it a sibling, or?
My mom has always been into video games, and she's kind of an outdoorsman and nerdy. So she would read encyclopedias and play video games, go to the arcade. She's from Michigan, which, if you know a little bit about the video game industry, the first arcade of the US opened in Michigan. So it's kind of where she got hooked initially.
Right. Okay. So no, I didn't know about the arcade industry in Michigan in particularly. I knew that there used to be quite a few game devs there though. Around the Detroit area.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a while ago. They all seem to move west or east, one of the two. Yeah. That's I feel like that's for the 90s, you know, for your mother to be getting you into games. That was very different at the time. I remember growing up and it was not seen as, you know, girly or feminine, you know, to be playing video games. Obviously that's completely changed now. But I'm only talking about, it's strange when you think it's only like 30 years ago that you know, I had a friend, very good friend, whose sister used to play with us, and I thought nothing of it really. But looking back, you know, it was a very male-dominated industry, especially in its marketing and you know, the primary fan base, I guess. So that's really interesting that your mother was really into games. So you just grew up watching and then playing for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the moment I could touch a controller, I was. So I think I've been playing video games since I was like 4.
Yeah.
3 or 4. It was Nintendo for the most part. She was mostly into Nintendo. I can't remember what kind of PlayStation it was. It was some sort of, it was either Sony or PlayStation or something. I have a terrible memory as well. But there was some non-Nintendo games we played when I was like 14, but I moved out shortly after I was 14.
Right.
So.
And you grew up in Alaska.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm from the North Pole, actually.
So really north in Alaska.
Yeah, I'm from the interior specifically.
Jeez. I mean, in the winter, there's not a whole bunch you could do as a kid. Like, when it's dark almost all the time and it's freezing all the time.
-40.
Yeah. That's some serious cold, like the kind of cold I can't even comprehend. I've never felt anything like that, apart from maybe going in a freezer for a couple of minutes.
It's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
It's exactly what it's like. Which, fun fact, -40 is the same in Fahrenheit and Celsius. Yeah.
I like
At
that.
my university, we would take photos in our bathing suits or underwear in front of the sign that says -40, and that's how you join the -40 club. 40 below club.
So you were there until after you were left college. You were in,
yeah.
And you moved to Seattle
when I was like 22.
Oh, right, okay. So you've been there 10,
nearly a decade. It's
nearly
crazy.
10 years. What was the so Alaska is a huge state, and it's incredibly
Hmm.
interesting to me because you don't get to. I haven't met too many people from Alaska. Um, what is the best and worst thing about living in Alaska?
Worst thing is the isolation, which during the pandemic, I felt like I was trained for this.
Yes, yeah,
Um, the best thing is you have not seen mountains, like the mountains in Alaska, like a glacier, like Valdez, Alaska is the greatest place. I went camping there, and you step out of your tent and you look up at the mountains, and it's so lush. Like there's trees everywhere, and then there's waterfalls shooting out of this mountain. And then you look over, and there's a huge glacier. And when you look up the word glacier blue, there is nothing like seeing a glacier except for in
yeah,
person, and it is glorious. And so moving to Washington State, I've loved Washington State because it feels like I'm a tiny Alaska. I have all the mountains, I have
yes,
all my trails, I have connection to civilization, and it's like a mini version of
yeah,
Alaska without the isolation. And it's like $200 to go to Alaska round trip usually. So I would go home often and
yes,
visit everybody.
yeah. You're not too far away. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I've seen obviously pictures. I'm reasonably well traveled. I've not been to Alaska. I've seen pictures, and if the pictures are like that, then I can't imagine what that looks like in
Y-
person.
you can't. Yeah. No, Ansel Adams was a famous black and white photographer. He took a lot of really famous landscape photography, and he has a great pieces from Alaska. I think I learned recently that it was Bob Ross. Bob Ross, I learned recently, was stationed in
Oh,
Alaska,
really?
and that's where he got a lot of his inspiration.
To stop?
Yeah,
Really? That's crazy. I mean,
yeah,
it's not. It makes complete sense, actually. That's
yeah.
why he's drawing land. That's why he was a landscape painter. Um,
Exactly, exactly. When someone told me that, I was like, "Duh, that makes so much
yeah,
sense."
definitely. So, what brought you to streaming exactly? And did you have much experience of Twitch or content creation before you hit that stream button?
Um, what brought me to streaming is I felt too happy about being a hermit during quarantine. So I'm from the class of quarantine, and because my mother sheltered me and she enjoys being sheltered and I enjoyed being sheltered, I felt like I was getting too comfortable again. And so that's what brought me to create content because I was like, there was a lot that went into it. I basically got rid of every relationship that I'd ever had up until like May of 2020, because I was raised in a world that I probably shouldn't have been around. And I needed to basically build a new friend circle and I wanted genuine connection. And the world was locked down. So I was like, well, I can't go to anywhere that would have a common interest. So why not uh, play video games
Yeah.
and find my friends? And I didn't watch Twitch. I didn't really know much. I knew of Twitch, and my friends had asked me to stream on Twitch before because we'd streamed in Discord. But um, I went onto Twitch to watch like a Sims 4 streamer
Yeah.
that led me to someone who was called Kiwi. She just renamed herself to Chelsea, and she was going through a really hard time. And her community, like in the chat, the people that were in the chat were basically comforting her in an authentic way and listening and sharing their stories. And to me, that was the first time that I had seen what community really meant. And I mean that from a human point of view, not a content creation point
Yes.
of view, because on the internet we hear content
Yeah.
creation and community
Hmm.
and da 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 da
Hmm.
da. And community is so different on like YouTube versus Twitter versus Instagram. Twitch, there's nothing like it. And I don't have any experience with Mixer or anything, so I don't know if we can compare it to that. Maybe it's just the live streaming
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, so I am an individual who doesn't like to be too comfortable, and I have a lot of anxiety. And the thing with anxiety in general is that the happier it is, the worse it gets. So
Yeah.
I figure I have to make it uncomfortable, but not to the point that it breaks me, but just pushes me slightly outside of my comfort zone. And so yeah, May 31st, 2020, I hit go live for the first time on my phone, had a little kitchen stream, just sipped some coffee and chatted at my phone. I think like 6 people showed up, which I felt like was a lot.
That's a lot for the first stream.
I was
Absolutely.
like, what? 6
Yeah,
people?
yeah, yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, the first group of friends that I found within the first month was not a great group of people that I shouldn't have been around yet
Mm-hmm.
again. And so it was in July of 2020 that I met someone called Steamy Streamers or Keith.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much most people that I know today are somehow through Keith in one way or the other.
Right. So I actually saw Keith in your chat earlier, and I don't know him well, but I know the old other half of Steamy Streamers,
Nick and
Owen,
Ellen.
absolutely,
I
and
watched
Owen
that.
and Peace have been on the podcast
Hmm?
together. So yeah, it's crazy how these networking connections work. Absolutely, but these are some great people who care deeply about the people that they care about, and real people, which is
Yeah.
it can. There are plenty of real people on Twitch, and there are plenty of people who aren't so real. But like you say, you met some people. I was the same. They weren't the right people. I didn't really know what I was looking for or what I was doing
Yeah.
anyway. So it's a learning curve, right? We
Yeah.
learn. So the way you feel is you feel anxious about falling into sort of a particular set of habits, routines
Hmm.
that might somehow stifle your growth or your progression as a person. Is that
I Yeah, I know I was suffocating. Like I know it wasn't
yeah,
working. Like but I was happy enough that I didn't want to make a change.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. And like you say, if you've grown up with certain parameters you have to fall in, and if you've been conditioned a
Hmm.
certain way, and you hit a moment where you're like, hang on, no, this is not how I should be living life. The anxiety is about not falling back into those behaviors. Would I be
Hmm.
right in saying that?
Hmm. Yeah, a part of it. I have all the
Yeah,
anxious.
I mean, that's as best as I can try and comprehend that. So you decided you were going to start streaming every single day. Now, this is something I am. There's probably a few people that done it. I don't know. This is the first time I've seen anybody who has streamed for over a year every single day, without fail. So, how did you come about thinking, well, I'm just going to stream every day? How did that happen?
Well, May 31st was my first stream. My birthday's in the middle of June, so I had like a Twitch birthday party where I played Animal Crossing.
Nice.
And for the most part I was like, oh, I'll just stream every Sunday. I'm a person who, it's backing up just a tiny bit. When you read on like how to create content on the internet, every tip was something that comforts me from like the human point of view.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
consistency, I like
Yeah.
consistency. Um, Schedules, I like
Yeah.
schedules. All of the things that they advise you for, I was like, wait, I do all that. So why don't I just be me?
Yeah.
If all of And I was watching all of these jerks. I'm not gonna talk about like the drama of the internet because there's always so
Yeah. Yeah.
much, but there's all these jerks who have such arrogance that they can be some sort of example that people can watch. And like the word influencer, yeah, everybody hates that
Mhm.
word, but that's what you're
Yeah,
fucking doing.
exactly.
Sorry.
You don't have to apologize.
So, like, everyone has parts of their job that they don't like, and everyone has responsibilities. And it is your duty, if you are going to accept this as a job, to fulfill that duty. And so I got angry, and you can kind of hear it now. And it like ignited this thing in me where I was like, okay, if you have the arrogance to go out there and do that, then why can't I? Why can't I try? Mary Oliver is an American poet from Ohio that is one of my favorites. And she wrote this poem that said, "Someone once gave me a box of sadness, and it took me too long to realize that this too was a gift.
Right.
And I wanted to take this box of sadness that was given to me and turn it into something
Yes.
good without being the blind leading the blind, without thinking that I somehow have all the answers. But I have a list of dictums that I've given myself that are like phrases and quotes and stuff that guide my life, I guess. And just I wanted to be the change I wanted to see in the world. And on July 1st, I was like, I'll just stream every day and see what happens. And then August 1st, then September, and then
It just carried on.
next thing I know, I just kept going. And I was like, okay. And then a couple of months ago, one of my friends, Sammy, was telling me about the world's longest consecutive streaming streak,
Yes.
which is like 2070 or something
Wow.
like that. And that's like 5 years
Yeah.
roughly. And this person streamed through having their baby and a whole bunch of things.
Jeez.
And I was like, why not?
Yeah.
I'll do that. 2088. That's my goal. I don't know what I'm gonna do after that. But that's my goal, is to find my friends, find the people like me, the people who said that altruism wasn't real. You're a liar.
Yeah.
And we're here. Like, and it feels so arrogant to talk about it like that, because like you don't think it like that. But when you're told to your face that you aren't real, I can't describe that feeling to you. When you tell, like, there's this phrase of like, when someone tells you who they are, believe them. Why doesn't that apply to everything?
Yeah.
Like, it only applies to the bad things,
Yeah.
apparently. If you say something bad one time, that's it, GG.
Yeah.
But
it only applies to the people that say it only applies to the things that they want it to apply to, which is completely inconsistent. But it's interesting what you say about these almost false prophets, I like to call them, actually. Because what I find is, and I mean, I probably wouldn't be on Twitter unless, you know, if I wasn't a content creator, I probably wouldn't be on Twitter. But because I can't help, if I see something I really strongly disagree with, or I see something, I can't help it. I have to call it out, because I don't think, you know, but the funny thing is if you're that person who goes against the grain, then you're the toxic one. So obviously on Twitter you get all these echo chambers and a lot of virtue signaling, hell of a lot of virtue signaling. And there's a couple of instances where I've seen, I've got hold of proof of absolute hypocrisy from these people, and they go nuts when I confront them, and they block me, and they're like, and it's like they've got all these people, and they're telling them, this is how you do it, this is how you stream, this is what you should do, this is how you should talk to people, this is how you should do this, this is how you should do that. And I'm like, how is that right? But the funny thing is, these people and these sort of, a lot of these streamers who've got, you know, a pretty big following, who lie somewhere in the middle, you know, not the big streamers and not the small streamers. A lot of them have this they won't make it as a top streamer because they don't speak their mind, for one, and they're not real. They won't say what they're thinking because they just want to please everybody. They want everybody in their chat, and they don't care who it is. They don't care who's in their community as long as the numbers are there. Now, the people at the top, I believe, are the people who are being themselves. Mostly, of course, there's always exceptions. they are being themselves, and they get in trouble a lot because of that. Some of them, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
big streamers get in trouble. But there was enough people who connected with that to keep them going. But I feel like when I entered your chat and what people say when they come into my chat is like, wow, everyone in here's so nice. And it's like, yeah, because we just encourage people to be themselves. And if they're not the right kind of people and they start acting in a way that everyone's a bit like, well, then you talk to them, and if they want to keep acting like that, then you get rid of them. Because I don't care about having one extra number on my view count. It doesn't matter. But there's a real problem
It's like
with
a type
people.
of culling.
Yeah, but what's the problem with culling? Why are so many people so scared of it, do you think?
I think you're hinting at it, at the people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to be accepted, and instead of them realizing that they should be accepted by people who naturally accept them. I'm backing up just a little bit. I feel like some people, like everyone wears different types of masks. I think it's important for them to recognize that, because I think maybe people don't realize what they're doing.
Yes.
Maybe they don't know that they're trying to cater to everybody versus just trying to make themselves happy. Maybe they have someone telling them, this is what you should do, and that's not what they want to do. Like, I actually get a lot of anxiety about people who say things like, wow, you stream every day? I'm going to stream every day. And I just so badly want to be like, if that works for you, do it. That sounds great. That sounds great. But I don't like hustle culture. No. I don't like the whole streaming, like working so much that you burn yourself out is somehow considered hard work. I think it's hard work to be balanced.
Yes.
Why isn't that praised more?
Yeah.
Like the work hard, play hard mentality, you know?
And
so
yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, that's a that I lived in the States, and the reason we came back was because my dad had a breakdown, and it was the American way of work hard, play hard that did that to him. We have it here as well. It's still a bad thing in the UK without a doubt, and it's worse than it was. It's absurd to me. It's absolutely absurd.
Like, what's the point? The point is to make yourself happy and contribute to society. However you think that you can do that is what you should do. That's it. But figuring out how you contribute to society changes and blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm not saying but it really is that easy.
Yeah. And so when you do this job and you get a message from somebody that says, hey, I've been having a bit of a shit time actually, but coming in and hanging out, sometimes just watching, you've really helped me. You'll have had it, because I know it, any real streamer worth their salt's had it, and there's nothing quite like that on this earth. There's nothing quite like that on this earth, and it's almost like, hey, am I being selfish? Because this almost feels like too good a feeling, because it's like, well, I do this as a job as well, but actually I did it because it was what I wanted to do, and the fact that I can help whoever, one person, 10 people, whatever, it is absolutely unreal and humbling.
Are you familiar with Marcus Aurelius?
I'm not.
He's kind of like the king of stoicism in general. And a lot of people have this like toxic mindset beyond what is stoic. And I try not to do anything black and white in general, or the extremes. And he teaches the philosophy of not letting anything impact you, both the good and the bad. And so that's something that I've tried to keep in mind when I started this journey, because I've watched content creators for 15 years.
Wow.
definitely, yeah. I'm like, how old am I? Yeah, 15 years. Uh, and I try to keep that in mind because what you were saying earlier about these big content creators in general, I think they hear it so often how much they're helping people and they brainwash themselves. They convince themselves that they have all the answers because they're hearing it hundreds of
Right.
thousands of times every single day. Um, like 6 months ago, I had to tell people to stop DMing me unless they actually needed
Yes.
something. And I felt bad about it.
Hmm.
I was getting over 100 DMs a day of people just simply saying, "Thank you for the stream. I feel so much
Yeah.
better." And so they weren't things that I should have been like, "Don't DM me
Yeah.
about."
Yeah. Of
But I was
course.
just
Of course.
overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
was like, I didn't, I felt, I was like, I couldn't answer every message. I couldn't even reply to
Hmm.
most like even react to most messages every
Yeah.
day. And then I was doing the whole like diversify your content portfolio, posting on like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and
Yep.
Twitch. And that was just so on top of posting that content, then replying to people. And I hate having people feel ignored
Yes.
or like I don't see them. And so that anxiety is weighing on me where I'm like, I'm not, and people aren't doing anything bad. They're just being
Yeah.
kind and
Yeah. Yeah.
supportive. And so both from like an egotistical trying to avoid that point of view and not hurting people in my own boundaries. Yeah, like 6 months ago, I had to tell people, please don't DM me unless you need something. Um, but yeah, I'm sorry, I went on a
Hey,
tangent.
no, that's what we do.
Oh yeah.
That's what it's
Okay.
all
It's
about.
my
That's
first
absolutely,
podcast.
that's great. Yeah, I definitely think that's the thing the people have to be aware of is like this the God complex almost that can definitely happen. I mean, it can happen. It happens to people with who just have big Twitter accounts because they can say whatever they want and they will get thousands of people that will like it and say yeah,
I think it's human nature.
yeah. Um, but also there's a lot of work obviously involved in what we do, and like you say, you try and you can't please all the people all the time, but also you don't want to. If you reply, you want to digest what's been said. You don't just want to give a
Yeah.
generic "Hey, thanks, no worries," because
Yeah.
it's not who you are. It's not who I am. We don't. That's not the sort of people we are. But
Yeah. I was just thinking about copying and pasting yes or like no problem, thanks. I was like, that's really weird. No, I wouldn't do.
so I wanted to mention something from when I was in your stream earlier, where
Mm,
you said that if you're being yourself,
mm,
it's not so easy to burn out. You don't feel like you're burning out being live every day because it's just being yourself. Like you put it, you do coffee, like you get up early and you do a morning coffee, right?
mm-hmm.
With the viewers.
Yes.
Um and you chat, you just have your coffee and chat just to begin with. And that's how you'd start your day anyway, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
because you're being, you're just being yourself. And it's something that it really struck a chord with me because people that watch this know I say that all the time. If you're being yourself, I don't feel like I'm sapping myself of energy because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
being me. Whereas if I try and
Mm-hmm.
be somebody completely over the top and like and try and give it all this energy that's not real the whole time, and I'm necking, big tubs of G Fuel and like that then yeah, then absolutely I can see people get exhausted doing that because it would be exhausting.
Yeah, especially if you don't believe in the things that you're shilling.
Yeah, G
Like,
Fuel.
uh, I would love to have a company sponsor me. I would love to work with a business, but I'm not going to work with someone that I don't care about. I'm not going to
Yeah.
work with like a company that like I don't think uh I don't think the brands I want to work with sponsor Twitch streamers right now, but maybe it's not yet. Hmm?
Well,
Hmm?
I
Outdoor research.
think that's a good point. Like, so I don't like I don't have G Fuel or Sneak or any of that crap, but
Mhm.
and I wouldn't encourage people to drink it either, because it's marketed. One, it's marketed at people who shouldn't really be having any serious caffeine intake in the first place. If you're under 18, you shouldn't be doing a load of caffeine. Like, but and all the other crap that's in there as well. Like so much processed shit. But not only that, it's like I wouldn't drink it. I don't drink it, but I do have there's a couple of drinks that I do drink that are almost sort of, they're not full meal replacement things. They're just sort of like on the go things, and it's powder, and the packaging is really plain, you know.
Soylent?
Well, in the UK, it's called there's one called Huel or something similar, and that's what it is. It's fuel. It's not. You know, it's not to give you. It's not to give you wings. It's literally vitamins, minerals, and complex carbs. This is all it is. There's no crap in it. It's not bright. You know, it's not a luminous green. Like, and I'm like, well, this is actually really handy for a streamer because I do quite long streams.
Yeah.
So when I have a break, I can literally, I'm hungry. I can get 400 calories with 2 scoops of this, and I'm good. And it's just like eating a meal. And I'm like, how come that's actually really convenient? Why are they not sponsoring streamers? Because, you know, we don't have a lot of time. So yeah, maybe you could look, you're the marketing guru, right?
I know, but my Twitch is not very brand friendly. They're gonna have to.
Yeah, you're gonna have to start shilling hard. Like, for everything. No. You're gonna have to have a on the fence attitude to every opinion that you have or anything somebody says.
No, I'm an American woman. I just have to stop swearing as much, but I don't give up.
Is that what it is in the States? If you're an American woman, as long as you're not swearing, you're brand friendly.
I mean, I'm thinking of like what else with my content would be not brand friendly, and the only thing is how much I swear. Like, I dropped the F-bomb in like 30 minutes before 7 a.m. So much.
I mean, I guess
think about it.
I mean, I guess it would depend. I guess it depends on the product, right?
Yeah.
But like,
But my point is, like, I want to work with makeup brands. It shouldn't really affect makeup brands too much, but like Chanel's probably not going to sponsor me as much as I would love her. Probably not.
If you're listening, Chanel.
Hey, Chanel, I could be the first. You could be the first. Let's talk.
Let's talk. Let's do it.
I can.
And actually, if you are listening, Chanel, Ali actually has a couple of 3 headshots on one of her scenes on her profile, and she can wear it anyway. She can wear it anyway. She could be a different person tomorrow. She'll still be Ali, but she'll look different.
Hit me up.
Yeah. DMs open.
To Chanel. Yes.
So I don't like to concentrate too much on the negative, but what is it that has, is it just those other is it just the fakeness of some people? Is that what you dislike about Twitch?
That's not inherently a Twitch thing. That's just a human thing I just kind of get over.
It is, but I guess it's something. It can be more difficult to get away from on Twitch, with regards to other people streaming and other people within the circles of the circles of the circles. Yeah. Obviously, we try and we try and grow our own communities the way we want to grow them, but inevitably there's crossovers and such. So. Is that something that drives you? I know it drives me wild, like seeing some of the things on the social media and stuff where you just know there's nothing. You look at them and there's nothing in their eyes. There's no passion for anything. And how do you manage that?
I almost feel like being raised by a narcissist helped me in this regard. Is I see them very quickly, but then I offer the benefit of the doubt and I hope that I'm wrong. But then I look for certain things or certain behaviors. And it's not the first time that they confirm it that I'll be like, okay, I shouldn't be around these people. But I have like my own checklist that I kind of work through that I can only describe as like a type of intuition at this point. And so I just think of it as like the worst part of dating. So you don't get like any of the dating benefit, but you're still getting a lesson out of it. Um,
So in
yeah.
saying you're raised by a narcissist, obviously you get to those conditions where obviously it's somebody
Mhm.
you're incredibly close to, and I guess you start to look for those positive traits. That was like how you were conditioned. You were thinking, well, but now you are looking at certain factors which you need to steer
Mm.
clear of, or you need to be aware of, so that you can manage the sort of relationship and or the how you communicate with them. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes and no. Like, you're not totally far off. So basically, am I get pulled in by them initially, but as soon as I confirm, I shut the door and there's no going back.
Right.
And I don't gossip, and I never played any sort of those games when I was in high school, and I am definitely not playing them as a grown
Yeah.
woman. But these people that are like that are still very like how they were in
Mm-hmm.
high school, because they don't want to change, because there's been no reason for them to
Yes.
change. And they think that they are so smart, and they think that they are so clever, and they trick people for a minute, but the truth always comes
Mm-hmm.
out. And so it's annoying, but summer heat is annoying. I can deal with
Yeah.
it. It's kind of like
Yeah.
that. Like, I don't, that doesn't really impact me so much. I wish that they would just be themselves. I really, this is a kind of a weird thing, but I weirdly like it when narcissists know that they're a narcissist,
Yes.
because then you can talk to them about it
Mm-hmm.
plainly as well. And I really enjoy that, because then I can just straight up call them on it. And then if they try to manipulate me, I'd be like, knock it off. Like, it's not okay. And I almost feel like that sort of relationship helps them, but it's my boundary and I don't let them ever get close under any circumstance.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's hard with Twitch, but I think that that's any sort of content creation, is all of us have some vein of narcissism at some
Yes.
point. Like, there's some part of us thinks that we're good enough to do what we're
Yeah.
doing. So I think part of this journey that I'm on right now is trying to figure out the difference between arrogance and
Yes.
confidence. And I feel like it's like playing with fire, and I don't want to catch on fire.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll make me safer because I'm aware of it. Is that the key? I have no idea. We're on a great experiment right now.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think with all these and what we were talking about earlier with having these echo chambers when within the
Mm,
groups only fuels that narcissism, because people can literally surround themselves with more yes men, women, than they've ever had before, and it's never been so easy to do it. And we were actually talking earlier um, about sexuality, and you said you were
mm-hmm,
pansexual,
mm-hmm,
and we were talking about how some people sort of try to control the community, like there's only one right opinion and everybody should be of that
mm-hmm,
opinion and move together. And what I wanted to ask you about was when you identify as pansexual and you are with a man, have you found that you've been given a hard time because you're the people ever even sort of try and say, well, you're pan but you're with a man, so
mm-hmm.
you're like, did they ever try and how can I put this, did they ever try and make out that you're not as valid because you're actually at the minute or whenever you've been with a man? So it's like if you're in a relationship with
Mm-hmm.
a man, are there people who try and make out that like you're not as valid in being a pansexual?
I think what's really difficult about the LGBTQIA community is that everyone has experienced such pain and trauma. And when you go through trauma in general, it changes the human brain. It makes you
Mm-hmm.
neurodivergent, whether you were born that way or not. And you have to actively manage your triggers. Your triggers are your responsibility, not anybody else's. and because my community, our community has experienced so much pain and real life danger and real life consequences for just being us, there's an expectation that if you are going to use the LGBTQIA tag on Twitch, that you need to be an advocate in every way, that you need to know basically everything about everyone. And so I hope that we move to a world where everyone remembers how nuanced everyone's story is, especially in the community that already has its own nuances. Like, at first, I thought I was bisexual, and then when I would tell my lesbian friends, they would tell me that I was just too weak to choose. And uh, not even gonna get into the straight people thing.
Yeah.
And then when I was dating women, they would constantly accuse me of I'm going to leave them for a man, or I'm just experimenting with
Right.
them, or things like that. And I would try to explain to anybody who didn't understand, like, just like heterosexual people, when you're monogamous and you are in a monogamous relationship, it's the same feeling. It doesn't matter who it's with. And so it feels like the hurt people thing. People repeat the patterns that they were taught. They repeat the things that they were brought up in. The way that they were received in the world is similar to how they will perceive the world. So
Yeah.
try to remember that.
Yeah, I think what you say about triggers being your responsibility is incredibly powerful. I totally agree with that through my own experiences as well. And that doesn't mean that obviously it doesn't mean that you can't be. You see, if I made a quote let's say I quoted it, put it on Twitter, hey, your triggers your responsibility, I'd probably get a load of hate for that. It's like, well, no, you should be nice to people. It's like, yeah, but that's just a fucking obvious thing to say. Like, it's just, there are loads of people that tweet the most obvious things and get hundreds of thousands of likes. It's like, hey, if you're attacking trans rights and you're an asshole, well, most reasonable people already know that, right? Like, you could do that all day. It's not going to help anything. But what annoys me is if I ask a question about anything, sometimes from the side of ignorance, sometimes from the side of devil's advocate. So I had a podcast where I spoke about I'd done a bit of research about the trans suicide rate, which is alarming, and I want to understand that better. We can't fully understand because we don't have that kind of data. We don't. And obviously not everybody would be comfortable with giving that type of data. And I totally agree with that. Now, I was lambasted for this because I was told that I shouldn't be talking about trans suicide without a trans person there. And I'm like, well, you're talking about such a small percent of the population that if they are the only ones around when people are talking about it, nobody's going to talk about it. Nobody, like, how, like, you can find, but the trans community are difficult to pin down, and understandably so for discussions like this, because they are so vulnerable and open to attack from people. So, but hey, don't we learn things by talking to people about things, by discussing things with other people? We can't make it better without talking about it. And I've never said that I talk from the position of I can't from anybody from the LGBT, because I am a straight white male. Obviously that means I shouldn't have an opinion. So which
that's not what that means.
which is what I also get a lot. And it's like, well, that's the most ridiculous thing to say. If you are, I yes, it means I don't understand what it's like to be marginalized in this country. Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. But who are the people whose minds that need changing? Are a lot of them people, the non-marginalized people? Well, yes, they are. So if you tell them that their opinion doesn't matter, but actually you want them to act differently, why are they going to give you the time of day? You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
crazy to me. Like, that's absolutely crazy. But it was just like, you know, you approach these things and you're trying to find out more information, and that's all it was. It was, you know, why is this happening? Why is it? I mean, there's things we can look at and you know, that are obvious, that it's
Mm-hmm.
difficult. It's difficult for people of the LGBT community. It's difficult for trans people, without a doubt. But, you know, why is this statistic so incredibly present? And you get shot down for asking a question like that by some people.
And I think regarding any sort of representation is because I hear that white men feel like you're not allowed to say anything because you're going to be attacked because you feel like you're almost like the scapegoat and whatnot. But there's the concept of, if you do what you always did, you're going to get what you always got. And from the beginning of human history, gay people have existed and have tried to politely ask for representation. Race is still a very big problem here in America. It's a big problem everywhere in the world, but I can only speak for my country. And I think something that I would love to encourage both sides, both the side that they're just so tired, and it's rightfully so, and then the other side who is just like, I'm just trying to help you. I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to do what I think is right. There's white savior complex. People need to look into that. And I think as white people, period, gender aside, we have to remember that pretty much everything around us was set up for us in every way. And everyone sees it, including the people who are marginalized. And the power that you have as a white male is that when you speak, people listen. I can't tell you how many times that I've sat in a meeting in the business world trying to just say what would have benefited the meeting, and I just have my male counterparts speaking over me. Or that's one reason why I lean into like this. There's like it's not ditzy, but like I play up the idiot card a little bit sometimes because I think it's funny, but it gets a better reaction. There's this concept of masculine power, energy, and feminine power and energy. And I like to lean more into the feminine energy because I just felt like it made me feel what other people felt being themselves. And so, on the same note of being yourself, for anybody in the LGBTQIA community, the suicide rate is really high. And it's for a bunch of different reasons, and I'm not trans, so this is me. I call it an allyism, an ally theory. I have so many theories that are based on nonsense, but I feel like the data's there. But what I feel like is missing is not only do you have, as a trans person, would they have to deal with the world being the world, calling them by the wrong pronoun, never accepting them the way that they are, talking about other trans people in a derogatory manner, but then they have to deal with dysmorphia themselves. They have to look in the mirror and acknowledge that what they think they see and what is reality is different. And then they have to go through medical treatment of hormones and surgery and recovery and finances. In some countries, you go through all of that, you pay out of pocket, and then you are still not accepted. And so there's just like layers on layers on layers. And that's what I can see from the surface. I can't even imagine.
And that's the thing. And that's what makes it so obviously so much more difficult. And obviously that must be a big reason behind the high suicide rate. And then obviously in some countries you can't even come out as transsexual.
You can't, or you'll be murdered, like actually. And so when when you wanted to talk about it and people were like, you need representation, I don't understand, like, on both
Yes.
sides. Say, I need representation. You don't really have the authority about this. These are some recommendations that I
Hmm.
would encourage you to get
Yeah.
started with, things like that. But instead, there's just like a hard
Hmm.
no. And then for those of us who are just trying to help, it it's difficult to palate that.
Yeah. Yes, because it was crazy because all I did was mention, I didn't even go into any depth. And I'd said so many times in the podcast, so many times, I do not know what it is like. I
Mhm.
don't. I've got no idea. Of course I don't. Um,
Mhm.
but I want to understand. All I want to do is
Mhm.
try. I want to try and understand the best I can. Because if we all try and understand the best we can, then we might be able to get somewhere and move forward. And
Yeah.
I know that I'm not. I don't care. Like I don't care what somebody. Why would I care what somebody? How somebody chooses to live their own life that doesn't affect anybody else. Um, and the fact that it does bother people like that. I really don't know what we do about that because it it's so crazy that anybody would care what somebody else is doing or who they love or that I really don't know. But I like to hold some sort of faith that most people are just either uneducated or they've been conditioned a certain way and they don't actually care as much as that they
Mhm.
think they do. But if
Mhm.
they're attacked for asking a question, then it's, it's probably not going to help. And I understand that some people, like you said earlier, they're tired, right? They're tired of
Mhm.
fighting. Um,
Mhm.
and you see you can see that they're tired of fighting. It must be absolutely.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah, I want to see how I can maybe help, like without the white savior complex. Like,
yeah,
how can I, like, what can I bear for you? How can I step up? How you don't have to pull me up. You don't need to educate me. Like, you have done what you
hmm,
needed to do. And I tried to change my family and I could not, and I had to walk away
yeah,
from it. But I have my own conditioning to get through,
of
you
course.
know?
I think like, I don't. Nobody has like all the full answers to these social problems. And like you say, this white savior thing, you see it a lot, and then you also see the people who are doing it to be seen to be doing it, right? Because they will, and they tend to be the people who want to shout about it. They will literally, and then they won't go and do some research. They won't ask questions. They won't speak to somebody who is marginalized. Which then that there's so much of that. But I feel like we should, I've also seen some, militant activists who are part of the uh part of the communities. And this is by no way stretching the imagination what most of the people from the communities are like. And I also try to remember that, some of the communities that are on Twitter, and in my experience, are very different people. And I'm only talking to myself about myself. And of course, this is, completely just my own experience. They're very different to the people that I've spoke to and met in real life who are from these marginalized communities. Now, I don't know whether that's just like a digital thing or whether that's what. But when people are being told exactly what they should do and how they should do it and how that they shouldn't ask questions, I don't see that as progressive in any way whatsoever. And that's what worries me more than
Mhm.
anything. Those the people who walk around in blind ignorance are just as much to blame. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that these people are bad. And a lot of the time their energy and their passion and what they are fighting for is right, but the way that they are doing it is in my opinion wrong, because they're pushing people away that could probably actually turn around and go, oh, actually, since you talked to me calmly and explained it rationally, I'll think about that, and actually what you say makes a lot of sense. People will come round to things that actually make sense,
Yeah.
like the fact that women couldn't vote for a ridiculous amount of time. since democracy was
In
born.
America, I got the right 100 years ago this year.
Right. So over time, and
so it only took a couple thousand
yeah,
years to ask nicely.
and there was obviously a lot of activism involved in that as well, which is what we learn about. But what you don't see a lot of in the history books is how many meetings were held, how many peaceful protests were held as well. Because if all we had in the UK was we're taught about the suffragettes, and what we're taught is they disrupted the postal service and they did this and they did it, and they did, because they were justifiably. But it wasn't just that. There was a lot of talking, a lot of peaceful protests. Majority, and after a while, when you keep talking to people, you realize, well, actually, yeah, because why shouldn't they be able to vote? It doesn't make sense. This affects their life. Why shouldn't they be able to vote? So,
but what you just said led into that, so for thousands of years, women didn't have the right to even speak.
Oh, true. Yes.
But it wasn't until we disrupted the postal system that we got the right to vote.
Yes.
And so in the same concept, it's in America, I've heard, I can't even remember exactly what people say, but I've heard something similar where people say well, Black people should just ask for equality nicer.
Oh.
They're not asking for equality in the right way.
Yeah.
And so not only is there no model for people to use as an example, and your point is valid, the likelihood of you listening to someone calmly and rationally talking to you over someone screaming and freaking out is it's obviously different. I'm trying to remember this other poem that I really like that basically says something along the lines, I'm going to paraphrase it badly, but it essentially says that when someone snaps, one person thinks they're overreacting and that person thinks that they're finally being brave.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think that that's something to keep in mind too, that if you have the capacity to see past hysteria or hysterical language or things like that, then I think that maybe that's your duty to be the mediator. And I almost feel like I might be a mediator between the two because I can see past the passion. And I can hear people wanting to help, but feeling rejected and silenced, and what you feel you have to offer is being rejected. And maybe that's my duty. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do with all this.
Yeah, I mean, and certainly 100 years ago, to be heard in those times was very difficult. And you really did have to. And even as much as 50 years ago, because 100 years ago, life was tough for everybody, right? Unless you were wealthy, which was a very few people at that time. And life was tough for absolutely everybody. So there was no way of getting heard. And now we have these platforms, and we can peacefully protest without fear of being arrested for the most part. Where we live, obviously. We can only talk for living in these westernized countries. But when you see so many people come together now, whether it's a peaceful protest or whatever, it gets coverage. There's nobody stopping somebody with their phone saying, look what's happening in London today. Nobody can stop that. Whereas 100 years ago, people were relying on the radio to listen to stuff. But certainly, when things are so incredibly, when there are such outrageous injustices, I'm totally behind kicking up a fuss and making sure that you're heard. When people are now arguing about the type of language that people use, that's what I think I find more difficult, because I don't want people to language, without a doubt, can be offensive. it can be offensive.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people would agree on that. It can be.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I very much like, it scares me the thought of laws being passed to stop.
Censorship.
Yeah. And that's
Ship.
censorship. But
Thanks.
that's something that really scares me. Like it really scares me, because I grew up and always considered myself so liberal in almost every aspect, you know. I guess, and you're a couple of years younger than me, so you grew up at a very similar time where we saw a lot of things change.
But I was raised
right.
in a very not liberal area. I was raised to believe that liberalism was a literal mental illness.
Wow.
And my family actually thinks that I'm actually completely mentally ill now because of my beliefs.
That's crazy.
Yeah. They believe that the last president of my country was placed there by God, and to question him would be to literally question God.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to process that, because that's obviously
I could see that.
Yeah, that's a big thing to have to deal with. Obviously. So how obviously what I was saying was, you know, we came through and we came from a time where, well, so I'll say what I saw. What I saw was growing up, you know, I would hear the odd racial slur that I didn't really understand, but more so a homophobic slur growing up. And it was, most of it was probably by people who didn't actually believe that, like themselves. They were not justified in saying those things, but I don't believe that they actually believed it. And then over time, it became to a point where, certainly in this country, well, there's still people against it, but I come across it, and bear in mind that I live in not for my whole life, but I've lived in a very sort of affluent and white area. I wouldn't say it's that conservative, but you know, if those things were still happening regularly, I'd hear it. I'm around enough local people to hear it, without a doubt, and enough of the older generation to hear it. And certainly over here, that changed, and that changed the society. But if you are growing up in those conditions, how do you see out of that? How do you see through what is being
cognitive dissonance?
Like, how do you see through something that's being fed to you every single day? Because when I was a kid, I believed that my mum and dad would protect me, and I believed that what they said, pretty much, not everything, but I believed what they said was correct. You know, until you get older and you question things a little bit. I don't have, my beliefs aren't that, for me, luckily, my beliefs aren't that different to my parents, so it wasn't a big problem. And I also didn't grow up with any hatred or bigotry. I didn't know what it was. That's why when I heard like extended family members say it, I was like, why are they so mad? Like, why are they so mad? Like about somebody, an Asian person working where they work. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And then you get older and you understand that obviously it's very complex. But how do you? You know, can I say how I'd have acted if that had been my parents? I don't know. I can't. So how do you see through? How do you overcome this sort of almost brainwashing, if you like, or
it's cognitive dissonance is what you're actively having to push against. It's this concept that if I accept this one thing, then everything I have ever known is a lie. And getting over that is kind of the first big thing. And so I think a couple things played into that. I think everyone has a bit of crazy in their family. We just happen to come from it. And I am young, but I've lived a long life. And I try to make the most of whatever I'm given.
Yeah.
And when I was 4, something traumatic happened that they put me in therapy from like a preventative point of view. And I think that that really helped me with metacognition in general,
Oh,
like
okay.
thinking about why you think the way you think, because basically every thought I've ever had is, why am I thinking this?
Yeah.
And so on one hand, I still had the what you're talking about, where it's nature versus nurture. Are
Mm.
you a product of your environment because you were raised there and that's all you've ever known? Or what part of you is nature? And so I feel like I come from a long line of independent women.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though they had their own set of brainwashing, I think the combination in my environment and then life experience and education, I guess we'll call it,
Yeah.
um, led me to just keep. I've always been curious. I was always that kid in class that would ask 1,000 questions and things like that. And so I think anybody who doesn't feel like they naturally have it, just keep asking why. Just keep asking why. Only you can unbrainwash you. Only you can get it through. No one is, anytime someone tells you the opposite of what you're believing, you're going to dig your feet in
Mm-hmm.
harder or like ground yourself more. And that's what I noticed was happening with my family. And I don't know why I've always been different from my family. I don't know if it's a generational thing that people just, if it's that willful ignorance. It feels like more than that in my case. But
Mm.
um yeah, it's basically just recognizing it and practicing. And you're gonna fall and you're gonna fall back into your old
Yeah.
habits. Or you're gonna say or do things that you didn't even know you weren't supposed to say or do, which is why I've always surrounded myself with people who are blunt that can tell me, like, don't do that. That's weird. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, I'm fine with my level of weird, but I don't want to make other people uncomfortable
Right.
level
Right.
of weird.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting what you say about metacognition to me, because that was something I
Mhm.
became aware of when I did CBT, actually, cognitive behavioral
Mm.
therapy. And I told the therapist that my biggest problem was thinking about thinking. Why? Why
Mhm.
am I thinking
Too
this? It doesn't
much.
make sense. And that's a horrible,
Mhm.
obviously, spin to get it. And that was when
Mhm.
I heard the term metacognition,
Mhm.
meta thinking, to put it more simply. Uh, and maybe, and I think, and then I realized at that point that's something I'd done actually before I was ill. It's something I'd done my whole life without realizing.
Mhm.
And are people like us? Does that make us more inquisitive, or are people just are most people doing it just on a different level? Um,
Mhm.
it's really interesting, really, really interesting. The
Agreed.
nature versus nurture thing is incredibly fascinating.
Always.
Um,
So when I was like 25, I found out that I had a sister I didn't know about,
wow,
and I met up with her. And there's this phrase that I say all the time where I can drink, a half bottle of vodka, but 2 glasses of wine and I can't feel my
right,
face. And so I sit down for dinner and she literally said that phrase. And I'm not saying it's like anything, but that's
yeah,
weird.
yeah, of
It's
course,
weird.
yeah, yeah. Well,
It's
absolutely.
like
You'd
one
be
of those
like,
weird
shit.
things. Why vodka? Why wine? Why both of us?
No,
And there are many things, but yeah.
well, but things like that happen, and it is weird. Like when you said today in your stream, when you said that being fake is exhausting, and keeping up some sort of character, and it's acting. It's exhausting.
I'm like, I'm anxious enough. I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
Like,
Like, but I've literally been talking about that to people on stream. Those things are weird.
yeah.
So your goal moving forward is you've got your goal of 2000 and
88 days.
2088 days. Um,
Mhm.
will it be for you a new challenge within streaming, or will it be a new challenge within life, do you think? Or do you just not know?
So it's impossible to know. Murmur. I don't know if this is my
Mm,
life. So one day I will do a different job. Um, could be in 2 months, could be in 10 years. I have no idea. But even then, this is still my life. I grew up on the
Mm-hmm.
internet. Like it is. I was on the internet before I streamed. I will be on the internet after I stream, and it feels like they will always be one and the same.
Yes.
So I think my challenge that I'm really afraid of is going viral because I don't know how I would manage and maintain the relationships that I currently have. Because right now it's really scalable. Right now, as things are growing slowly, it's really nice. And I don't want to grow rapidly.
Yeah.
I want the slow growth because I think it helps
Yeah.
everyone involved. And I always made the joke that if I ever get 1 million followers, I'm just going to create a new
Yeah.
account and that anybody who's like real will
Just
just
follow
follow me
that.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I really only want the 1% of the 1%. And that's no disrespect to anybody else. But I'm not for everyone. My whole life, people have either loved me or hated
Mm-hmm.
me. And I've never really had too much of like that in between phase. The older I got, I became more palatable,
Yes.
but I didn't feel fake still. I think of myself like a 6 burner gas stove,
Yeah.
and I can turn all the way up to 10 on all the burners, but not every human can handle that. And so I don't give every human a 10 of all 6 burners because it's intense for a lot of
Yeah.
people. And I think a lot of people are like that. And yeah.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And obviously, if you're in a situation or you're in a job or something, you're sharing a workspace, you're sharing platforms, you're sharing many different stuff, many different things. You have to consider other people. And I think
Hmm.
that's what riles us about people who are being fake in their own space and channel, because they absolutely don't have to pander to anybody in their own channel. And that's why
Yeah.
I feel like that's why it's one of our bugbears, because um why wouldn't you be? And like you say, you as an
Yeah.
adult, you in certain situations you do have to become more palatable.
Read the
Yeah,
room.
especially when you're working, because you got to work. So it's like, oh well, I've got to work, so you have to go to people, and these aren't all the people that you choose to socialize with, clearly.
Yeah.
Um, which
I would love to be friends with my coworkers, but I don't have that
no,
expectation.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Not at
yeah,
all.
exactly. And and then you do the thing. Oh, hey, we're gonna go here. It'd be good if everyone could go, because it's a it's
Mhm.
sort of team building, but it's not. It's just everyone's going out and having drinks, and you do it because you feel like it's the right thing to do, right?
Okay, but that's one of my favorite things about streaming and this whole world is that the networking is genuine
Exactly,
connection. It's not it's like people you want to actually hang out with,
exactly.
and it is a part of your job, and
Mm,
that's so
yeah,
cool. Like you don't have and yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that's what's become more and more attractive to me. As time goes on, that I didn't even realize was going to happen. But to change it up a little bit, do you think it's weird because like you're almost the same age as me? Like we kind of remember before the internet was prolific, like not before it's invented, but before everyone had it in their homes. Just those few years that you
Mhm.
can remember being young, where the internet wasn't a thing. Um, do you ever feel like you could revisit those times? Because I don't know whether it's just nostalgia of being young and carefree. Because obviously, when I was a kid, I had very little, and I
Mm.
mean very little, to worry about as a kid, which is it's kind of in a way kind of bad, because everything's so good. If you're a comfortable kid, there's no expectations, and then when you released into the world, it's like
Mm.
shit. No, this is a
Mm.
lot not as comfortable. But I don't know whether it is the nostalgia. I don't know whether it's a genuine, like, what just having to like no social media to look at first thing. No social media.
Yeah, but we had
We
magazines.
did, that's right. And obviously things were promoted through magazines. There were still
Mhm.
things that were making people
Mhm.
unhealthy things that people were looking at, like especially
Mhm.
for women, to men as well, but definitely the magazine in those times, it was all women's magazines were promoting unrealistic expectations.
The super thin.
Oh yeah. And that was the thing. It was always so.
It was literally called heroin chic.
Yeah.
Literally was the name of like.
Well, when it was when the supermodels were Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, they were literally like, that was the look that they were encouraging women to aspire to have. And it's kind of crazy now that it's like, I don't care for the Kardashians much, either way. They're not really a thing that bothers me. Obviously they are incredibly famous, like beyond my comprehension. But like the body image isn't so uniform now. It's like, yes, these people are a lot of these people are taking on surgeries and stuff, and then it's becoming unrealistic. But there's not this sort of set when it on the supermodels of the time were that just these stick thin models who all look the same.
And then this is kind of where I'm like bothered nowadays. It's like, if you're stick thin, you're gorgeous as you are. Nobody needs to tell people who are thin to eat more cheeseburgers. Just like you shouldn't be telling people who are a weight that you don't agree with, they should eat more salads.
Exactly.
Like, mind your business.
Up to them.
But I like how there's a full diversity of bodies now. Like,
yes.
All of them.
Yeah. And you see like I've seen adverts not just with different body types, for holidays with bikinis and stuff like that, but also
I saw stretch marks in the store
the
other day. I can't even tell you how weird it was for me to be able to see that.
Yeah, because I mean, whatever is usually the case here, it's usually magnified in the States, if that makes sense. When I go over, and when I lived there, I noticed even from a very young age. So like if something was being promoted, morally, whether we would consider it morally correct or morally not, it would be being promoted 10 times in the States, kind of thing. So I wonder, because I've not been to the States now for a few years, 5 years probably. I wonder about the States and whether it's the same there. So like you say, you've seen stretch marks in what was it, a department store?
It was in like a Target. Yeah. It was, I can't remember if it was underwear or swimsuit, and she was a normal weight. Like, she wasn't like, it looked like she was just a normal woman who had a baby and went back to her normal weight, but they didn't airbrush it. And that, like, I am not ashamed at the way that I look. However, there are parts of me that are very natural that I'm ashamed of, because every image I've ever seen doesn't look anything like me.
Right. And that we've all got things that we feel insecure about. Absolutely. And again, I wonder how much of that is, well, obviously a big part of it is nurture from what we've seen growing up. I wonder how much of that is nature also. Like, how much do we naturally care?
I think to a degree. I think for the most part, like, we need to survive. So like, I have a life goal of doing 3 pull-ups. If the zombie apocalypse happens, I gotta pull myself off the cliff.
Right.
What I'm saying? Work on my cardio.
So you can run a bit. So I think
So I feel like there has to be some level of like, I've had too much sugar over the past 3 days. I probably should reduce. But that doesn't equal I now have an ED. And da. Like, there has to be some sort of in between.
There was a culture of I don't know if it was a thing in the States. They had like these gossip magazines that were, I know that in the States, slander and not printing the truth is very difficult to action against in any court of law because of freedom of speech, right? Which is one of the downsides of it. Whereas here, if somebody writes something about you in a publication, they can be sued if it's not the truth.
But
it's not always easy to prosecute. But anyway,
then you have situations like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Of course. And it's like, And that's a bigger problem altogether, where it's like there are celebrities in this country. So there was a famous footballer called Ryan Giggs. He played for Manchester United. He's Welsh, and he had an affair with his brother's wife.
Oh,
right?
class.
But nobody found out this had happened. When it came out, it was years later, because he'd been able to file for a gagging order to prevent the media printing the story. And it wasn't until the Scotland realized that they could get away with printing it because they didn't fall under the same law, even though they're in the UK, that it came out. And then once it was out, all the other papers were allowed to print it anyway. And I was like,
because they could just cite that
source. That because he got so much money, he could just get the best team and say, well, I don't want this to come out, so let's file an injunction. You know, if that was me, like, and like for whatever reason I was famous, but like I was in my financial position, they would have just been out. You know, it had just been out there. If I had the fame but no money, it would have just been out, and that would have been it. So like, but these magazines anyway, they were gossip magazines basically. So that would have been like a 5-6 page spread. You know what I mean? But they had this section called Circle of Shame. And it would be like, primarily it would be celebrity women on holiday wearing a bikini. And they've literally, like, they're sitting down and they're bending down to pick something up. And they'll go, look at the belly rolls on this. And it's like, this woman is not carrying a lot of weight, and it's whatever, it's up to her anyway. She's literally like, she's almost doubled in half. Of course her skin's gonna fold. Like, and you would see this, and I used to think, even at the time, like now, like they've had to rein it in because people suddenly turn around and saying, "You fucking assholes for doing this." Actually, and I was like, this was happening for years and years and years, and you think, Jesus, like, and it was like, oh, hey, look at these women when they're not airbrushed. It's like, yes, they're just normal women. Actually, it turns out, because they are normal women, what was it? These magazines were read by, like, primarily by women, like 90% female audience, and I like trying to compute that. I can't, you know, it's not even like a men's men. We had different things to give men an unrealistic expectations. There's plenty of them, but this was a magazine aimed at women, saying, "Wow, look at this woman! Doesn't she look terrible?" And most of the women buying these magazines are normal women with all different shapes and size bodies, and I'm like, I'm trying to process why this is a thing.
I think it's because now they're painting it as we're trying to show you realistic bodies. We're trying to show you what it looks like when they're not airbrushed, and then other people look at it and take comfort in saying, like, oh wow, okay, I do look normal. This is what I should look like. And so I think it's that concept that people are trying to hold on to, and I don't know if I don't feel like there is a right way to do it unless it's the person themselves. So if Kim Kardashian wants to post a filtered selfie and an unfiltered selfie, I think that's her prerogative. Like, that's her right. Like,
that's up to her.
And maybe that is the difference, is maybe now that we have this world of Instagram and social media, why not use these tools for good? Because I hear all the time how the internet ruined society and blah, 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 blah. And it just makes me roll my eyes, because the internet is no different than real life. If you think that the way that people speak to women on the internet is disgusting, and you think it's so hard to be a woman, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's no different from what I have experienced in real life, my entire life to this day. Nothing's different. I just now have written evidence of them trying to be a jerk in my DMs.
Rather than...
So in fact, I almost feel like it's better because I have the ability to ban and block them. I've already filed police reports within my first year. And then there's certain things that I can't talk about because it encourages certain behaviors, whether they're genuine behaviors or people thinking that they're funny. And so that part's kind of annoying, but I think that we should use these tools like Instagram and whatnot to help
Mm.
versus hurt. So if we've identified that it's bad for society for us to see photoshopped, unrealistic images, why don't we start posting
Realistic
realistic
images.
images? The actor that played Joffrey in
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, thank you. He spoke at the Oxford panel or whatever that's called when people go and like speak at Oxford.
Yeah,
Like they have like a discussion or
that's right.
something.
It's in that they hold it in the it's the building is the debating chamber.
Yeah.
But yes, I've seen quite a few of the discussions held there.
And one that he did, I almost feel like encouraged me to start creating content on the internet where he was talking about how like back during the caveman days, we would see someone eat berries and then they would die, and we would say, "Oh, we shouldn't eat those
Yeah.
poisonous berries." And we would learn from seeing people. And so, in theory, anybody who is used as an example is in that same bucket, whether it's a temporary example or a long-term example. Like someone who comes into someone's chat for 5 minutes can be used as example
Yeah.
to someone who's been on the internet since its
Yes.
inception. And so I feel like we're recognizing the things that are bad about it. So why can't we purge those things and lean into the things we know we should? Like I don't hear a lot of actual discussions on how we can make the internet a better place.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I just hear how
Mm-hmm.
terrible it is and how it's ruining the world and how blah 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 blah. And there are good and bad things to everything. But think about like when books were invented. The
Oh,
old people at that time were like, "Oh, these young people doing all this
yeah.
reading." Like every single generation forever. Like there's a Greek proverb that says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in which shade they will never sit."
Yes.
So I'm going to plant a tree, and I might never sit in that shade. And I might be the first, but I will not be the last. And if I know that we shouldn't set ourselves on fire to keep each other warm,
Yeah.
but if I can pave a path and make it easier for the next
Yep.
person, then I just feel like that's how we change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of people who don't subscribe to that, and I think it's it's just another form of narcissism because it isn't going to affect them.
Well, I mean, I
Plus, it's
think
the effort of
people just
doing
get
it as well.
tired, and pessimism is easy.
Yeah.
And I like to do things that are a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Because I had a thing with my dad. I was talking to my dad about about the the pushes that we've had to find more green energy and the things we have and haven't done. And his answer was, well, yeah, but China are throwing up coal, and I'm like, so it doesn't make a difference. And I'm like, yes, that's true.
Yes.
But does that mean that we shouldn't be doing the right things? And if eventually you don't know about, things change, governments change, policies change. If we look at how the world's changed in 100 years, then shit, what will it look like in another 100 years? And if everyone around you starts doing it, then maybe, just maybe, a more progressive government that takes over will think, actually, we can't keep doing this because it's not. So I see that in my dad, and it's like, it's scary because it's almost like, hey, and I guess to some extent he just thinks, well, hey, I'm like nearly 65, so I haven't got much time left, and like,
Do you think they think that?
I know I do. No, I do. So I think
You do?
I do. No, I definitely think that.
I think they think they've paid their time and that we need to listen to them. I don't think they think they're leaving anytime soon, and I think that we're getting sick of it.
I think my dad used to think like that, and I think now he's at the point where and now I think he's at the point where he doesn't care so much. I think he's changed. My nephew was born almost a couple of years ago, and that's changed him slightly, I think, because it's made him think about life after he's gone. There's certainly
interesting.
Yeah, there's certainly some parts of him that have mellowed in that aspect. But I also think you're definitely right. There was definitely that before, you know, he's done his time. He's been at work. And when you've been at work as long as him, and when you've seen as much as he's seen, like definitely. Although he, you know, luckily for me, he was always, even though he didn't follow this advice necessarily himself, he was always like, you got to do what makes you happy. He'd also encouraged me to, you know, work in he actually used to encourage me to get into marketing, funnily enough, because he told me that I'd be sitting around a table and making a lot of money and having just meet the odd meetings. I mean, it's not realistic, especially not now. But
depends on what position.
It definitely depends on that position, and I feel like there was certainly years ago there was more of a certainly in the UK there was more of a. I mean, in the UK people used to go to drinking at lunchtime. You know, like, and then it just like, oh hey, well we'll get this done and we'll do a bit of work and then we'll. I think a lot of that's gone. Like corporations became more streamlined and profits mattered a lot more. But I like to think that I don't become that pessimistic as I get older. I like to think that I try and become even more open-minded as I get older, which is against our biology, I think isn't it? It's against our biology to do that because of our like natural survival instincts, learned behaviors, that it becomes it's not. But it's by no means is it. If you're doing things and look at things in the right way, and you try and keep that balance, like you were saying earlier, I don't think it is that difficult to do. But it's just I feel like it's something that's easy. Like you say, it's easier to not worry about it. It's easier to slip into that.
And I think with the older generation is they were taught to just blindly listen to the people that were older than them. And for us, it's been trying to maintain being respectful while realizing that everything that they've ever taught us is kind of wrong.
Yeah. My mum was brought up, as many people's parents were at that time, to be children were to be seen and not heard. That was the saying. That was the expression. Children are to be seen and not heard.
That's what I heard. Yep.
And that meant asking questions as well.
Oh yeah, no. But one parenting thing that my mom did that I agreed. I don't want children, but if I wanted children, this is what my process would be if they're old enough to ask, they're old enough to know. Yes. And obviously, if your 3-year-old says where do babies come from, you're not going to like go into detail. But like,
you just.
I really liked that my mom encouraged me to basically ask whatever I want whatever I wanted whenever I wanted. Like, but that wasn't the rest of the world that I lived in.
No.
That was just at home with my mom when she was a single mom. So
yeah,
it was just us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you, I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but I think if I was to have a child, I would guess that if they asked the question, I'd probably rather it be me that tried to give them an answer than somebody I don't know or they don't know that well or even trust that much. So
or we would know that we don't know the answer and we would go say, this is how you find the answer. This is how you see through it.
Yeah.
Versus like my mom, if she didn't know the answer, she would just make it up. Like literally and then I just went around believing her.
Yeah. So like the intention of, you know, asking old enough to ask, old enough to know was good, but maybe the answers weren't perhaps the best answers.
I think she was just afraid to say, I don't know. I think she was, and I have this part of me where I'm so used to just knowing the answer that when you don't know the answer, it takes practice in saying like, oh, I don't know that. Let me go research.
Yeah, that's something I learned hard. Like I used to have quite a corporate job for a supermarket company that got pretty intense. And there was a time I enjoyed it as well. And then there was a time that I absolutely despised it. But I had to learn very quickly that if I wanted to progress, and it was one of the good things that I learned about it, was a lot of it, they were quite progressive with their training. And a lot of it was, you know, looking at weaknesses, you know, and realizing that, oh, I'm 24 now, and the world doesn't revolve around me, and I don't know the answer to everything, and I can ask people for help. Like you say, I struggle. I took some time struggling with that and admitting to myself that that's what I'd been doing, you know, for a while. Not you know, not to the point where I was alienating my friends or like, but I definitely did, you know, I definitely did do that, and being told and learning that is tough. It is tough. And you and having been through that, you can see where it comes from, and like you say, and then if you don't go through a process or have to do something where you're called out on it, or then I guess you don't learn, do you?
And it's a practice, and that feeling, that like, oh shit feeling, gets worse the older you get and the less you practice it. And I almost feel like that's what is going there's, I think, a lot going on with the older generations, but I think that's part of it too. Is like they weren't allowed to call out the people older than them, and now that they're older, it's the same concept. And I hate ageism in general. I hate when people discredit people for being young, and I would also hate to be discredited for being a certain age. The only reason why I bring it up in this format is just because it's just been my experience to date, and it seems like it echoes in every nation across the world.
That's why that's the other thing I don't like is like the boomer thing has become like a meme. And that is,
and boomers are offended by it, and I'm like, it's the brain. You can be a 7-year-old boomer. I just need you to know.
And it's like it's kind of weird, because it's like somebody got a grip of that and started saying, well, hey, you shouldn't be doing this or you should be doing that, and then some people got a grip of it and tried to make it into some sort of trying to wage like some sort of war against people of a certain age with it. And I was just like, this one word has gained so much traction for so many different reasons and with so many different meanings. And I'm like, how does this happen? And you know, this, most people don't care and they're just using it as a meme or a joke, and they don't. I fully agree that. But then some people try and actually weaponize it, and then it does become ageist. But I'm like this person who's like, I don't care if somebody calls somebody a boomer, because I think people should be able to say what they want to say, you know, as long as it's not trying to hurt anybody else, you know.
But the word boomer hurts me. Okay, well, you know what? Hearing millennials ruined everything before we could even do anything was great.
Yeah, and that's
but
and that's nuts. It's nuts.
But you're going to repeat the same behavior. So millennials who are using this word weaponized, you were offended that boomers called you a millennial and blamed you for things. So now you're going to do the exact same thing that they were just doing to you.
Yeah.
It's not a joke for you. It's not a meme.
Yeah. It's like this other thing like that annoys me on Twitter is like, white men say this. And I'm like, it's the same. Like, yeah, I'm not marginalized where I live. I could move somewhere and be marginalized if I wanted to. But why would I do that, right? Like, willingly, unless, you know, I had to. And that's what people have had to do unwillingly in the past. But I don't get that. It's like, it does it offend me? No. But isn't that just the same thing? You can't tar everybody, or like if you want to talk about if we know we're talking about generalizations, then yeah, and data and stuff like that. But you know, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing.
It's just hurt people.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. And so on all sides, everyone, pain begets more pain. Like you're just gonna, I don't like the concept of fighting fire with fire.
Yeah.
But if I'm gonna keep leaning into that analogy, fighting fire comes from forest fires that are burning out of control, and they are destroying everything in its path.
Yeah.
Yet if you do a controlled burn, it will meet it and it will stop the
Yes. Yeah.
fire. And so how can we take that concept and apply it to human nature? Because clearly what we've done is not working. As a woman, as a person of the LGBTQIA plus community, that's not working because the world is still the way it is. And I'm up here on the privilege scale. What about everybody
Yeah.
else? If I feel this way, if you
Yeah.
feel this way, imagine what it's
Yeah.
like.
That's
Like,
I try. Yeah. You got to try and get your head around that. I'd push back a little bit on the it's not working entirely because I think we're better off than we were 100 years ago. Not to say there's not a lot to be done because that's not what I'm saying. But I'd say
we weren't alive then.
Well, I'm better. I know I'm better off. I know I'm better off than my grandparents were in terms of, and I know that, you know, people in general, so, you know, from certain groups are better off than they were 100 years ago. But like you say, moving forward at the minute, it doesn't feel like we are. It doesn't feel like this last 10, 15 years doesn't feel like we've made much progress at all.
I feel like it's because I don't know how to say this in an eloquent way, so I'm just gonna say it. So there's so many humans on the earth. What percentage is in each generation? I don't know the answer to this, but I'm gonna look it up after this. But what percentage is in each generation and whose voice is being heard? Because what it feels like is that 10% of the population of the whole world that exists is speaking for the other 90%. And this is why it's just so cheesy what I'm about to say, but I fully believe it. But I really think that the generation younger than us, they are a different breed of human and they're going to change everything. And I want to make sure that I'm out of the way for it and that I've done everything I can to help. Not that it's their responsibility to change the world, but that they have the ability. That the older generation, you're going to have to work really, really hard. Our generation, we're going to have to work hard. The younger generation, they are so smart and they are so connected. And I hate the word smart because we were talking about this the other day because there's all these different facets of what is smart, emotionally intelligent, etc. Well, I almost feel like the next generation is all of it. From the moment they could read, they have had access to all of human history forever. Picture the Hall of Alexander and then amplify that by like a million. Like,
it's nuts.
I can't even imagine what it's like. And yet they're told that the earth is going to be on fire and that there will be no jobs for them and that everyone is depressed and miserable. And everybody that's in their 30s talks about how terrible it is to be in their 30s. And I want everybody that's in their 30s to stop it. Yeah, you're right. We're not the same as when we were 22, but we are not geriatric. Like, I need you to calm down. Like, I feel great, and I'm mad at everybody who told me that 32 was going to somehow be anything that it's not, because it's great. Like, every age that I've been to date has been exactly what I've wanted to be when I've been that age, and I'm grateful for it. At 22 is a little annoying, actually. Everyone talks to you like you're an idiot. So, other than that.
I feel like at 22, obviously I still had a lot to learn, but I feel like most of my morals and principles were not set and in stone because I'm always open to change, but I was getting a real feeling for who I was and what my purpose was at that age. But you still, at 22, you still look very young, so people make assumptions, I guess. So yeah, I get that. I totally got that. I think around that age too, like, for sure. I think it's not really like I joke about being I make a joke about being 26 on stream, but honestly, I don't really care. Like, and I kind of feel like I am still, in a way, not only like just in my body and stuff, because my body doesn't feel any different. And my mind doesn't feel that different. I just feel like I've learned more.
My body doesn't feel too different, but mm, my mind feels more secure. Like, I'm not afraid to tell people to fuck off now
Yeah,
when before I kind of was.
yeah.
Mostly because I didn't know how to say it.
And I guess you have to when you become an adult male and you people actually consider you as an adult male, there's less to push back against for an adult male than a female, especially if you've been in a professional if you're working in a professional uh scenario or capacity.
Mm-hmm.
There's more there is more to push against for
Mm-hmm.
sure, like anybody with eyes and ears
I
can.
I wasn't allowed to learn about any of this. So even though we've talked about some pretty social justice topics, I was never allowed to talk about any of this growing up. I didn't talk about it during
mm,
university.
mm,
This is mostly self-education from the internet and
yeah.
reading and things like that.
uh so like we're almost up on time, but
Hmm.
so one thing that I've learned really recently that fascinated me actually about was a debate on the gender pay gap.
Mm.
um and the core of the debate is not really what I talk about. I found out there was a study that they've been conducting in Scandinavia where they have tried to make they've tried where these are the countries that are seen as more progressive and try to be more egalitarian, more fair, and give more equality of choice um than any other country. And the study's been going on for a while, and they're mainly studies conducted by liberal leaning um, clinical psychologists and researchers.
Hmm.
And what they found was that because what they expected was to see uh, more women going into engineering roles, more men going into caring and nursing roles, because obviously there's more opportunity, quality of opportunity. And what they found was the opposite. So what they found is that comparing to countries like the UK and the US,
Hmm.
they have found that given the choice, many women are choosing, and it wasn't about whether they're choosing to work or not or be professionals. It was about the professions that they choose. It was
Hmm.
clear from the studies that women did want to be professionals. But when they got to choose what they wanted, they were more likely to go into caring roles, and they found that more women were actually becoming nurses, and more men were becoming engineers, given the resources to make it more easy for them to start a career or a path doing those
How
things.
how is it easier?
But with like the opportunities of what they could do at school, the vocational
Mm.
subjects that they could do at school, they have a lot more freedom of choice with that. Obviously, it's not by any stretch the same. It never will
Mhm.
be. It can't be. But like, and obviously,
Mhm.
there's a massive social element. But
Mhm.
what they found was these countries had gone further than any other to make sure that there was more of a choice. The
Mhm.
same, probably not, but more of a choice. And what they found was that more women were going into nursing and more men were going into engineering than the likes of the UK and the United States.
Mm.
So because we're told, and in terms of Europe, the UK is a lot of Europeans don't like us because we're not no because we're not as seen as being as progressive as they are. And in many aspects, that's absolutely true. I believe that, and they are countries that pay more tax. And we pay a lot more tax than the States, because we pay for our healthcare and all that sort of thing. We have the National Health Service, so we just walk into hospital and it's like, hey, no bill.
Mhm.
Um, but they pay a lot more again. They're
Mhm.
paying a lot more tax. So they have, and they have better education. They have better roads, they have
Mhm.
better infrastructure. People are happier. Um, so these are seen as progressive countries. So so all the data and all the analysis was shocked, absolutely shocked.
I have questions.
Sorry, yeah, go for it. That's just what I'm wondering. I'm wondering what you think about that. Because
I think
that
there's a
blew
lot of
my
things.
mind.
Yeah. I think correlation and causation is really difficult, especially regarding social behavior, especially regarding a career. So, example, I've always wanted to work in tech. I love tech. I love everything about tech. However, I only lasted 6 months because that was the most toxic environment I have ever
Yes.
experienced in my entire life. Not only was I sexualized in every single aspect of everything that I did, regardless of me working for a top 5 tech company,
Yes.
but every meeting I was set up to look like an idiot. There would literally be moments that people would ask me questions, things that I shouldn't know the answer to, just so that they could look smarter.
Yes.
And I can't even imagine what a degree would look like. The people that I interact with today are in that sector, as we would call it, and they
Yes.
behave the exact same way. I just, as a streamer, have the authority to ban them if they get too
Yeah, of
condescending and
course,
annoying.
of course,
Can't do that in real
of
life.
course.
So if my country was offering me the same pay to be an engineer and to be abused every day, or to be a nurse, which is easy because every woman I've ever known has been a nurse and has been
Yes.
taught to be maternal and has
Yes.
taught me how to cook and clean
Yes.
from the moment that I could start cleaning. Why wouldn't I do something that was just easy to me because I've always been taught how to do this?
Yeah.
So these studies are so challenging, and they're used as a way to say, see, we don't need to make any changes.
No, yeah,
Women are just going to choose it anyway.
no, I do see that, but
yeah,
when it's compared to the US and the UK, these are countries that aren't very dissimilar, you know, in so many ways. This is why I find it so interesting, because I don't care, you know, whether a woman chooses to be and I mean, part of that is my mum and dad were divorced. I grew up with my mum. I was left with my mum is a has worked as a pediatric cancer and leukemia nurse for 43 years. So and she's always worked full time. So I've grown up in that environment where, you know, my mum went to work, and she's an incredibly strong woman. And if I wasn't with her, obviously I was with my grandma, who was a nurse as well. So, you know, to me, it's not that strange, you know, to see women at work, and I obviously held a lot of respect for them.
And hear what you just said. Your grandma was a nurse. Your mom was a nurse. So if you had a sister who had the choice to be a nurse or an engineer, what do you think your sister would choose?
Yeah, but absolutely, and I can see that. But then why the difference in the Nordic countries to who have made conscious efforts to go further?
How long was the study? How long did they have to change? How many generations was it? Because all of this training has been.
There are so many studies. There are so many.
Yeah.
And it's been done over a long time. And the people who were looking for this weren't looking for that outcome either. Because I think it was, you know, these were supposed to be progressive studies, which I'm totally for, you know, and I think the equality of opportunity should be a thing. I just don't think that equality of outcome is possible for so many factors. So many factors.
I think it depends on what's the expectation of the outcome. Is it one person that would have been a nurse is now an engineer?
No.
Because is that,
no.
you know, like, is that successful?
No. Equality of outcome is like, equality of outcome would mean that there are almost an equal amount of men and women doing the same different jobs. But then there are so many factors, and this is only one of them. You know, this is only one factor. But you know, when you go to a hospital, it's run by women. The hospitals are run by women. They are in this country anyway. The admin staff are women. A lot of not most of the doctors. A lot of the doctors are women. All the nurses, 95% of them are women. And like, obviously I grew up around that. And then there's the aspect that, you know, a vast generalization about one of the key differences between men and women. And it's a massive generalization. And I kind of don't like it, because I'm like, and it's that women care more about people and men care more about things. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's not fair.
But no, and I'm only talking about it as a generalization. But then,
can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
So I feel like as a woman, I'm allowed to feel every emotion except anger.
Mm-hmm.
And as a man, you are allowed to only feel anger.
Yes.
Like that's an acceptable reaction for you, but not for me.
Yes. So that's where, so on the back of that, what I see, what it then questions me is how much of this is just ingrained into us, you know, and how, you know, are the women choosing this because they naturally choose it, and how much of it is socially injected into them?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's that nature nurture thing, and we know that there's the social conditioning.
Like I can agree that from an animal point of view, if I create a creature, I'm going to want to keep that creature alive. So there's got to be something in me that inherently wants to keep a creature alive. But in the same vein, my male counterpart is attempting to spread his genes. So he also wants to keep the thing alive.
Yes. Yeah.
So
you talk, and we're talking about, you know, when we were Neanderthals, and we still are to some extent. We've come a long way from that, you know, where to the point where, and we've evolved to realize and have enough brain function to realize that, hey, we disagree over this, and if we physically fight, it might not be the best outcome for either of us. Whereas obviously hundreds of thousands of years ago, that wasn't the case. So does that mean as well that we grow to the point where, and evolve to the point where it truly is just what we choose, and we are doing this because we choose to do it, and not because we are naturally more inclined to do it. But will it never change because, or will it only change to a certain extent because of our ultimate biological difference?
The lizard brain.
But it's really fascinating because stuff like we can do the studies where it's like this, and we know that it doesn't mean it's not a, you know, it just shows one thing in one light, and it doesn't measure so many different things, like so many different things. It absolutely fascinates me. It's something, that's why I love talking to people like you about it, and because every woman I get to talk to is not just an opinion that's different to my own. It's an aspect or way of looking at life that I could absolutely never imagine. And I think a lot of people ask me why I've had so many women on the podcast. I've been actually said some. I actually had like this guy say, like, well, he said a couple of things that it didn't really bother me, but it was like, oh, you know, you're just trying to get. It's like, well, no, I feel like you want me to sit here with another man and go, hey, Bob, like, hey, what do you think about? What do you think it's like when it's so easily accessible, when women are 50% of the population? Why would I not then try and balance it out? You know, yeah, like I said earlier, it's not always easier to get certain marginalized people to talk about things for different reasons. One of the reasons is that there aren't as many of those people, and it's not that easy. But like, if I can get a woman on to talk about their side of things and what that's like, then why wouldn't I do that? Why, you know, why wouldn't I try and get a more balanced look?
I think, I hate that I've said this so many times in this podcast, but it's just that hurt people thing. Like, people speak from their place of insecurity, or people, like, I love jokes and laughter and humor. And I also agree that there shouldn't really be off-limit jokes and whatnot, but then I also struggle with the fact that I think that there should be, because I think all jokes come from like a place of honesty. Like, you thought the thought, so clearly you think the thing you're thinking. Like, you made the joke, so like, I didn't even have that thought in the first place. It's hard, but I think, I don't know.
I think the way I try and see things is like, when I grew up, when I was like 12, South Park came out, and I was like, at first I didn't really think much of the politics in it and stuff like that, then as I got older, they were pushing things further. But not only that, I started to understand that the satirical side of it, the comedy, was like, shit, actually what they're saying here is something I should actually be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And I find they're fascinating people. I watch their interviews, and their argument for what they say is obviously there's normally a deeper meaning, but also nobody is off limits. But that means nobody, and probably who gets the piss taken out of them the most, like normally white American men on the show, which can pass you by if you don't look at it too closely. But I'm like, shit. The same. I'd like to think that I've like all kinds of different dark humor, not just to do with race and sexuality stuff, but some really dark stuff. But then I'm like you. I feel like, hey, I don't want to actually upset anybody either. And that's a really difficult, really difficult like balance. Of, well, you know, who's to say, you know, who gets the ultimate say on what's right and wrong on that.
And sometimes it's that whole like, if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry sort of situation. Yeah, definitely. So,
but there are people who are adamant that there is a boundary here, and I'm like, okay, like I wouldn't go.
I mean, it seems it's really obvious with racist stuff.
Yeah. It's like,
but like,
yeah. Or you know, if you talk about like I don't know, something that just affects every person. Like, let's say it's about euthanasia. You know, for whatever reason, like that's something that everyone can consider, you know, whether there are different elements to it, like if you are severely ill or whatever, of course, and much more nuances, and people joke about that. And it's like I've heard people say, well, you shouldn't joke about that because that's death. And it's like, well, hey, but we all die actually. So does that mean, so how is that off limits? Because I'm going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die. Like it's fascinating, and we get to see people's opinions in this day and age because of social media and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I
like it.
Ali, I want to thank you so much for being so open and honest with all the listeners. It's been I've learned a lot, definitely, which is what I always hope for over anything. All of Ali's links will be in the description. And as you know, if you watch me, it's not we don't always talk about all this heavy stuff, which is why I have this corner where we talk about this stuff. Ali's streams are incredibly fun. The community's great. I see a lot of what's in Ali's community, in my own community. Nobody takes themselves too seriously, and we all think we all want to go the same way. We're all pushing for the same things.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, we call ourselves the Alliance of the Wholesome Trolls. So,
I think that's you're gonna troll, but they're gonna troll you because they can, not because you are from another country or a different color, or because
no.
Ali, thank you very much. Thank you guys for listening. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.